My name's Morgan Brien. I am the Deputy Director of Pupillage in Chambers, assisted and in fact led by my colleague James McHugh, who's the Director of Pupillage. James is responsible for the retention element of pupillage and the learning element in terms of what happens when you're a pupil. My job, my main role is in actual getting you a pupillage and the application process. I recall 14 years ago now, when I was at the university up the road in Northumbria studying the bar course, applying for pupillage. My view then, which it probably would be now, is if any Chambers was mad enough to give me a pupillage, I would have bitten their hand off and I would have been happy at that, and frankly wouldn't have cared what that Chambers was like. I was just happy to get in the door. I am aware now that the situation has changed, and that when people are applying, it is very difficult when simply looking at a website or even briefly attending a mini pupillage to identify what Chambers is right for you, more now than ever than simply Chambers looking and asking themselves whether you're the right candidate for them. I can assure each and every one of you, the Pupillage Committee is acutely aware of how difficult and how expensive the path to pupillage is. It's not getting any easier. We have all been there. There are 5 of us on the committee. So there's myself, there's James, there's John Crawford, who I think has just left the building. There's Rebecca Suttle, who's at the back there, and there's Peter Marcus, who's based in Leeds. We have all gone through this process. We know what it's like. We know it's stressful. We know it's hard. And we know you will face a lot of rejection. Half the battle is perseverance. There is, unfortunately, no secret to any of this. There is no tips that I can give you tonight that will give you a guaranteed pupillage here or elsewhere. There are, however, some traps to avoid, and there are some criteria that we are looking for. And more importantly, having spent the last 6 or 7 years doing interviews and sifting applications, I can tell you what are some of the common shortfalls in applications and the common mistakes that you can easily avoid to avoid getting knocked out in that sift, to make it through to an interview and then hopefully get offered a pupillage here. There is no shortage, I am aware, of material available online, podcasts, any number of books now on getting pupillage. I'm not going to repeat that. You can research that for yourselves. I'm simply going to give you my insight of what we're looking for and what we see when people don't get selected for interview or don't get selected at interview. I hope this evening does illuminate that we do take the process very seriously. All of us on the Pupillage Committee have undergone fairly extensive recruitment training, and part of the reason for that is not only to ensure a fair process for you, but it's to ensure that we offer to the right candidates. And when we offer you that pupillage, it is on the basis that you will, in 10 months' time or 9 to 10 months after you start pupillage, you will be offered a tenancy here. I appreciate nowadays that, particularly in the northeastern circuit, there are less chambers because chambers have started to merge than there was when I started 10 years ago. And of those chambers, they are offering more pupillages. The consequence of that is it is now not uncommon for some people, when they're offered one pupillage, to be offered more than one from a variety of chambers, both on circuit and across the country. It is, I'd imagine, difficult for anyone in that rather envious situation. I wasn't one of those people, so I can't really comment too much on what it's like, but it's difficult when you don't have that much experience of which chambers to choose. And that is ultimately why we've invited you along tonight. It's for you to get to know us, some of the members, some of the pupils, and see what Chambers is actually like and see what a pupillage here is like. But before we get to the why you should accept pupillage here, I'm going to give you some short tips on how you get pupillage here. And from my experience, I'm conscious of the need to keep this brief. I have condensed this to 5 tips. There are plenty more, but I don't want to bore you. The first tip is, unfortunately, a pretty disappointing one to hear, but it is that there are no tips. There is no shortcut to getting pupillage. There is nothing I can tell you tonight that you're going to go away and think, well, that's it. I've now got this in the bag. There is no silver bullet. I'm sorry to disappoint you about that, but the application itself, the first interview and the second interview, they all require extensive preparation. And you don't really need me to tell you that. I'm simply going to emphasize it again. The second tip is mistakes. It's pretty glib for me to say avoid mistakes, but avoid mistakes. We get somewhere in the region of 150 applications every year. That varies from year to year. The Pupillage Committee divide them up and sift them ourselves. I had no idea what sifting pupillage applications was like until I started doing it. What happens, for those who are curious about what actually happens to your form when you send it in to the gateway, is that we, amongst ourselves, agree on the criteria. We will then pick 2 to 3 applications at random. Each of us will mark them to ensure that the technical phrase is calibration, but to ensure that we're marking on a similar scale. And then we will divide up the remaining applications. So each of us will have somewhere in the region of 20 to 40 application forms to read on any given year. Each application takes at least 10 minutes to read it properly. Then we have to mark it. Then we have to compare it. I tend to be reading these applications after court in the evening. I'm not looking for a reason to put your application in the bin, but if I find it, I will use it. And a good application takes longer to read than a bad application. So if you get the circuit wrong, and if you say that you're looking forward to working in the Northern Circuit, that's a pretty surefire way to get yours back of the pile. Equally, if you think that we are based in Essex, your application is not going to be read with that much care as it would otherwise be. And please spell advocacy right. These are simple mistakes. They're easy to avoid, but if you make them, your application will not go any further. The third tip is questions. And this is the application form specifically. Our advert on the gateway, I think, is going to go live, I'm assured, by the end of this week. I'm not going to spoil the surprise tonight by telling you what questions are on it. There is, suffice to say, there will be a question, and an additional question on the law. There will be an additional question on your character, and there will be a question which can reveal, which is, why have you chosen to apply to us? By the time you come to write this application, it is too late to change your A levels. It's too late to change your degree mark, and it's too late to change the fact that you didn't win the advocacy competition in university. We are aware of that. It is not too late to give these written questions some thought. I'm not overly concerned about what law you would change and why, if that is the question. That isn't the question, but that's an example. I am more concerned about your ability to evidence your written advocacy. I am looking for, in this application, we're all looking for someone that can write an application form in the same manner that they can write an opinion to a solicitor, or in the same manner that they can write written submissions to court. And when you think about it like that, you'll not go too far wrong. Can you tell the story? Can you present a written argument? Ultimately, can you do the job? The fourth tip comes down to your experience. I'm not interested, again, if you happen to know a High Court judge or if you've happened to have done marshalling with Lord Reid. I'm more interested in how you got that experience. What steps did you take? What actions have you taken to get where you are now? What have you learned from that experience? That's what we want to know. What have you gleaned from your mini pupillage that is going to help you on day one when you start on your feet? Whether you've done 3 mini pupillages or 300, the reality is it's not going to make much difference. However, if you can tell me from the 3 mini pupillages that you have done what you've learned from each one, that sets it apart, that will score you higher marks. What have you improved on? How have you improved? What skills do you have that a solicitor is going to want to instruct you? That's what we're looking for in the application. That's what you need to think about. There is a world of difference between someone who has written their application a couple of nights before, proofread it once and sent it off. I've done that and I didn't get invited to interview for those applications. Those people who have written their application, thought about it, reviewed it, thought about it some more, rewritten it, give it to someone else to read, probably thought about it some more, then submitted it. They are the ones that get invited to interview. Do the latter. And finally, interviews. For those of you who get that far, well done. You're halfway there. What that means is on paper, you're good enough to do the job. Now convince us at interview. It is commonly said that barristers are paid to think on their feet. That is not entirely accurate. And that is reflected at interviews. You are paid to think before you get on your feet. And that is the difference between a good barrister and a very good barrister. And that is the difference between a good interview and a very good interview. And we can tell pretty early on in the interview those who have thought about it thoroughly beforehand. That being said, you will be asked some questions that are designed to test your ability to think on your feet. When that happens, the key word is think. When people ask for feedback, I could give the same feedback to every person that doesn't get selected at interview stage. And that is that they have not thought enough about the question when they give their answer. If you get to an interview, don't be shy about silence. When we ask you a question, think about the answer before you give it. If you take away nothing else from tonight, you will not go too far wrong. Right, I think that's probably enough from me. Now you know how to get pupillage here. I think it's probably about time you heard why you should accept pupillage here if you do get offered it. So I shall pass over to James.
Hello, everybody. My name's James McHugh. I'm the head of Pupillage here at Trinity. I've just taken over this role, having been deputy for a few years before then. And Morgan is right. My job tonight is to sell us to you. But we know, as Morgan has said, how competitive it is to get pupillage, but we're also acutely aware as a Chambers offering pupillage, that those of you who are good enough to get through the interview stage and get to the stage where you are receiving offers are probably good enough to have offers from more places than just us. And so why should you consider applying to us in the first place? And why should you consider saying yes if you're one of the lucky few who gets made a pupillage offer? Well, I'm going to start by talking to you about the thing that people think it's occasionally a bit vulgar to talk about, and I'm going to talk to you about the money. We have what we feel is an extremely competitive pupillage award. The award, we've increased it again this year, so the award is going to be £40,000 for the year. That's going to be broken down as a £15,000 award in your first six and a £25,000 guaranteed receipt system in your second six. For those of you who don't know or are a bit confused as to how guaranteed receipts work, it works like this. At the end of your month, and I'm not going to do the maths on the spot, we divide £25,000 by 6. If you've not made that money in receipts in that month, we'll top your income up so that you make sure you're at that level. I'm sure that our current pupils will talk about it, but we found that's incredibly useful when you're first starting out in the profession. And it's an assurance to you because we know how expensive the process is of both degree and postgraduate qualification to get here, that you're being rewarded properly for the hard work, both that you've put in to get here and for the hard work that you'll be doing during pupillage. The opportunities for earning beyond your pupillage at Trinity are incredibly attractive indeed. Our current crop of pupils will talk to you about this, but I think we advertise on our website that we expect within their first 12 months of being on their feet, all of our pupils to have billed at least £50,000 in that time. And for most of our pupils, if not all of them, they find they exceed that figure by some distance. So we work very hard in terms of marketing and with our clerking team to make sure that we get the best work here and that you're remunerated well for doing it. And so in terms of income, we think that we can compete easily with certainly any other chambers on the Northeastern Circuit. Secondly, location. It's no longer the case that if you apply at a set in Newcastle, your career will be restricted to working in Newcastle and the surrounding areas. That's changed for 2 reasons. Firstly, we've taken great time and effort to expand Chambers, and we are now truly a multi-city operation. We've got a base in Newcastle, a base in Middlesbrough, and a base in Leeds. Gone are the days where you are restricted to one place, and we try and ensure that all of our pupils get a spread of experience across all of the areas where we are based. I can speak as somebody who's from Leeds originally and has spent a lot of time living in Newcastle. They're both fantastic cities to live in. Newcastle's reputation for nightlife and socials speaks for itself. I know that a lot of you go to university up here already, so you'll know that. They're fantastic places to live. They're fantastic places to work. The legal community in Newcastle and the Northeast, on the Northeastern Circuit generally, is a brilliant environment to work in. The legal community in Newcastle, even if you're not a member of these chambers, is very tight-knit. You'll find friends really easily. You'll find support groups really easily. And it really is a brilliant place to work and to forge your legal career. Aside from location, there is Chambers itself. And I'm conscious that you might think, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But Trinity Chambers' reputation, in my view, speaks for itself in terms of the breadth of work that we do and the quality of work that we do. Our criminal practitioners are, from a very early stage in their career, exposed to work being led by silks, heavyweight trials in their own name, and encouraged to develop relationships in their own name with solicitors who have a lot of very good work. Similarly, in terms of family law, you are from a very early stage in your career exposed to high quality work. The civil team, which is the team that I'm part of, is going from strength to strength. Last year, we had the highest value case ever heard in the Northeast, heard in Newcastle, with Simon Goldberg, Casey, and Richard Stubbs acting in that. Lastly, I want to talk to you about the structure of the pupillage and the training and support you will receive during it. Myself, Morgan, Rebecca, John, and Peter work incredibly hard to make sure that we give you the best support that you can possibly have during the course of your pupillage. It starts with, before you come into Chambers, making sure you're invited to social events, coming in to meet the team, coming in to meet the clerks that are going to be clerking you, getting you introduced to your supervisor, making sure that you know what you need to have equipment-wise and kit-wise and knowledge-wise to hit the ground running. We work very hard to make sure that you're put with the right pupil supervisor who is going to help you develop in the best possible way for your career. We listen to the sort of experience that you want to get, and where possible, we try and tailor pupil supervisor appointments with the sort of things that we think will be interesting to see, we think that you'll enjoy seeing, but most importantly, that we think will be beneficial for your development as a practitioner. Morgan's said it already, but I want to reiterate. When we recruit at Trinity, we recruit with a view to taking you on as a tenant. It is incredibly rare that we have a pupil at Trinity who does not go on to get tenancy here. And the reason for that is simple. When we recruit you, we have an interest in developing you for the long term, and we think the best way to recruit people and the best way to build a Chambers is by recruiting quality people and encouraging their practice and encouraging them to flourish. It's a cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. We really treat Chambers like a big family. If people need support, either during pupillage or later on in their career, I'm confident that there are people who will tell you they get it. Everybody looks out for each other, everybody supports one another, and everybody's really keen to see promising young careers develop. When you take pupillage with us, we will assign you what's called a buddy, in addition to your pupil supervisor. So that's somebody who's fairly junior, probably a recent tenant, and they're there to be the first port of call for any of the queries that you have that you think might be daft queries that you don't want to ask your pupil supervisor about. Somebody who you can pick a phone up to when you think like you're stuck in court and you don't know what the answer is. But also, and again, I'm sure everybody here who's in the room from Trinity will attest to this, the culture within Chambers is that if you've got a question about a case, about ethics, or about anything in general, you can pick up the phone to anybody, you can knock on anybody's door within Chambers, and if they can't help you, they will point you in the direction of somebody who can. That's probably about enough from me as to why you should choose Trinity. Thank you very much for giving up your time to come in to see us. I look forward to reading your applications, meeting some of you at interview, and hopefully working with some of you in the future. Thank you very much.